So, you want to know the real reason why people become atheists? Well, we're going to be taking a look at another Religion for Breakfast video.
The really real reason.
Yeah, the real reason why people become atheists. I haven't seen anything of this, but got a good title on it, and thought we'd check it out.
How does a theist become an atheist? One popular explanation is reasoning and rationality. If the tenets of one's religion do not hold up to someone's rigorous intellectual scrutiny, then there's a good chance they will become an atheist. This explanation is very popular among the so-called New Atheists, a group of scientists and philosophers who, since the early 2000s, have criticized religion and its role in government and society. This came up in a roundtable conversation between the so-called Four Horsemen of Atheism, Christopher Hitchens, Daniel Dennett, Richard Dawkins, and Sam Harris, who put it this way: "I'm constantly getting email from people who have lost their faith and were, in effect, argued out of it, and the straw that broke the camel's back was either one of our books or some other process of reasoning." Sam Harris seems pretty clear. With the right information, you can reason your way into becoming an atheist.
Right there, had to stop right there,
Quick stop.
Even that face that he was making, that I've got all the patience in the world snapshot face that he's got. That is the wet dream of intellectual, angsty intellectual, hyper rational young men, is to I've converted over 400 people into it. A claim like that, you know how many emails I get of people? Because it doesn't work like that in real life. You argue and argue and argue. It's ugly. Friendships are severed. Families are fucking torn apart because of this four horsemen of the argument apocalypse. Yeah. Which, by the way, I am an atheist, so it doesn't even matter to me. But what's funny to me is the way things are portrayed on the internet. That, got him. Gotcha. Haven't I got you? The famous Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
Gotcha. You never get someone in real life. And I know I might probably face a deluge of people who are actually I have. I've totally got people in real life. 90% of the time, it's cringy and ugly, and people endlessly argue, and it ruins Thanksgiving, and it ruins otherwise peaceful nights where you could all just be sitting together, drinking, having a good time. Yeah. An argument breaks out, sometimes a fight. And people got to apologize to each other. I guess I see your way. I don't know. It just stinks of stubbornness. And when you're one of the four horsemen of the atheist apocalypse, I imagine that's fucking lonely as hell. They're together there, but they go on these argument tours where they get together with people and they argue in front of stadiums and argue and isolated and argue and have frustration at people that still somehow have faith despite all the argument. Just chill out, because I reflect all your collective angst. It comes through me. I'm a lightning rod for it, and you see it represented clearly for once in someone like me. You don't even realize how addicted to arguing you all are. You're addicted to it. But it doesn't feel good. There's a better feeling to have. I've had it. We talked about this earlier before we started. We were like, man, the world really wanted to snatch up that enlightenment we had a moment ago. It feels better to be peaceful. It feels better to be, in a non-intellectual just state of oceanic togetherness with people. You don't have to be right, for God's sake. Yeah. That being said, now I can calm down. Now I can stretch my fingers and legs and relax
and get into it
and watch this.
And many atheists have shared personal accounts describing their atheism as, to some degree, resulting from critical analysis. So is analytical thinking really a main driver of atheism? Well, in recent years, scholars have found that the correlation between atheism and rationality is actually very inconsistent and cannot be found across cultures. In fact, there's an emerging picture that there are much more important causes of non-belief. In this episode, we're going to explore several social and psychological pathways that lead people to atheism. Check out these headlines. Religious faithfuls lack logic, study implies. Analytic thinking erodes belief in God. Even the religious lose faith when they think critically. These stories came out just a few years after that round table during New Atheism's peak popularity, and all of these articles were responding to a paper published in the journal Science by the psychology professors Ara Norenzayan and Will Gervais. It was titled Analytic Thinking Promotes Religious Disbelief, and the article shared findings from experiments that seemingly showed that people report being less religious when they were exposed to tasks associated with critical thinking, like doing a word puzzle or looking at an image of Rodin's The Thinker. Now, the authors acknowledged that the findings of the study were modest, and they were based on a limited data set, experimenting on a group of Canadian university students. Given these limitations, the results could be due to the fact that the study involved self-reporting in an experimental setting. In other words, participants could have been influenced by the context in which they were asked about their religious beliefs. Participants might have felt pressured to say they were less religious when exposed to a symbol associated with rationality. However, despite the modesty of the study, the media quickly boosted it as evidence that critical thinking would be the end of religion. Well, the scientific process continues, as it always does, and other scientists could not replicate the results. One of the most interesting follow-up studies found that correlations between analytic thinking and atheism were not only weak, but actually changed across cultures. In fact, in some countries, analytic thinkers might be more religious. They published their findings in the article Analytic Atheism, a cross-culturally weak and fickle phenomenon. They hypothesized if analytical thought predicts lower belief in gods, this predictive effect should be both substantial and universal across cultures. So they studied 13 diverse countries with different religious populations, including China, India, the United Arab Emirates, and the United States, among others, administering a cognitive test designed to measure analytical thought. They found that only 3 countries showed evidence of a link between analytical thought and non-belief: Australia, Singapore, and the United States. Other countries had ambiguous results, and even a few showed the inverse. For example, the results from the UK found that analytical thinkers were mildly more religious. They concluded that the relationship between cognitive reflection and disbelief is globally both weak and fickle. So, as it stands, despite ongoing research, there is not much evidence to indicate that rationality is a meaningful pathway to atheism, at least on the society level. There are plenty of anecdotal examples of individual people who converted to atheism through a process of critical analysis. But at the large scale, the population level, correlations between critical thinking and religiosity differ depending on where you test for them, which doesn't really match the stereotypical new atheist thesis. So if rationality is not the main cause of atheism, what is? Norenzayan and Gervais continued their research by flipping the question on its head. Instead of asking how do theists become atheists, they followed up with another study asking, what does it take for people to be believers in the first place? In other words, what psychological and cultural factors need to be in place in a given person to believe in a given God at a given time?
Just before we get into this next section of it, I think he did do a good thing by pointing out that it's not rationality that leads someone into atheist, because as we've discovered on this channel, we're doing the reactions for a few years now, like a lot of these religious channels are called like the rational believer. They believe that their rationality, like it's under their belief system.
And some religions more than others. You know the ones.
Oh yeah.
Some of the religions more than others, like, are the cornerstone is logic.
Yeah.
Spiritual logic.
Yeah. So I think he's
You
definitely...
know who you are.
Yeah. Pointing out...
It's fine. It's just an attribute. For Pete's sake, what, are you not proud of that?
Yeah.
Oh, don't identify it.
Yeah. Which says something about rationality. It's like one person's rationality isn't another person's rationality. What you think is rational is not rational to someone else. So that should say something about rationality right there. But anyway.
Who gives a shit? What's your mother effing experience, man? Some people are so robotic. You ever heard that term, non-player character, NPCs or whatever? That's so real. Such a real thing. And when I get all up in arms and I'm acting all crazy, I'm an NPC. I'm like the crazy NPC. Just exist, for God's sake. You ain't never getting the kingdom of heaven. Not in this lifetime. It's not going to happen for you. Sorry. Actually, you know what? That's too mean. I bless you. You will enter the kingdom in this lifetime. My blessings to you out of mercy from me. But only because you heard what I'm about to say. Just exist, for God's sake. Realize that thinking ain't it. It will never be it. It never will. You know how many philosophers have come before you, people with quadruple digit IQs? You ain't going to solve this shit. You ain't going to crack this nut. Just look around and exist, for God's sake.
And be it.
And dwell in the kingdom.
Yeah.
Happily, joyfully.
Good.
And
well said.
That's enough. That's all it needs to be said.
Well said.
Yeah, good.
All right, we'll continue on.
And could atheism emerge when those factors are not present? They came up with 3 additional psychological and social factors that may promote and maintain a person's belief in God: mentalization, or the ability to imagine the mind of another; motivation; and cultural credibility. Maybe atheism is a phenomenon that arises when you don't have enough of these factors in play. Let's break it down. They hypothesize that people need to be able to form stable mental representations of gods and other supernatural agents in order to continuously believe in them. Now, what do I mean by stable mental representations? If you have a hard time imagining gods, you might be less likely to believe in them. Neuroscientists of religion have argued that we probably think about gods using the same cognitive systems that we use to think about the minds of other people. This is a set of processes called theory of mind, or mentalizing, which refers to the ability to attribute intentions, beliefs, and desires to other minds. This cognitive ability plays an important role in how we connect with others, like anticipating people's reactions, gauging their emotions, or responding in a way that feels right to them. It stands to reason that individual differences in this intuitive mind-reading ability might be associated with different degrees of belief in gods, because these same theory of mind pathways in our brain may help us attribute emotions and intentions to the invisible agents that we call gods.
That's cool.
So having a slightly tougher time decoding mental states in others might make it just a little bit tougher to mentally represent supernatural agents. The authors tested this idea, and their initial experiments did find some limited correlations. People who found mentalizing tasks a little bit more challenging also tended to report higher rates of atheism. However, a subsequent study found that the correlation between mentalizing and non-belief are small, inconsistent across countries, and is easily overshadowed by other cultural factors. Imagining the mind of others may not be all that central to belief in gods. After all, many religions conceive of God or gods as totally unhuman-like, unknowable, and much less likely to have a close relationship with humanity. So there are plenty of theological options out there for people who have a tougher time mentalizing gods. So if mentalizing may not be all that necessary for believing in gods, what is? Noren Zion and Gervais hypothesized another pathway: apathy. In order to continuously believe in a god or gods, people need to be motivated to treat them as real. Sociologists and anthropologists have argued that religious motivation is intimately connected to people's everyday circumstances, but religious motivation is not evenly distributed across the world. Under conditions of instability, insecurity, and chaos, people often become more religious, and religious beliefs and practices might help individuals cope with existential anxieties like the fear of death. These theories have variously been called the terror management theory, compensatory control, existential security, or the secularization thesis. One example comes from the work of Harvard professor Joe Henrich and his colleagues, who looked at how experiencing war motivates religiosity. The authors analyzed survey data from 3 post-conflict countries, Uganda, Sierra Leone, and Tajikistan, and they found that people who were exposed to the horrors of war were more likely to participate in Christian or Muslim religious groups even a decade later. Moreover, the elevated religiosity emerges gradually over time. This suggests that after the fighting ends, people are motivated to seek out social groups, and eventually sort themselves into religious groups. So perhaps atheism is more likely to occur where people are slightly more apathetic and less concerned with existential threats.
Man, that was really interesting, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That part that he just said. What was he say? It was almost like they concerned with existential threats, like after the warring, they find social groups that happen to be religious social groups. And then there's this, I wonder if it's like guilt, like, oh shit, I murdered so many people. I better get, if there's a God, I'm in trouble or something, or it's weird, the evolution. And some of the strongest Christians I've ever met came from violent backgrounds or came from like, man, I was a sinner. I was a sinner and God saved me. The Christians that make it, the Christians that stay a Christian forever. If you were born into Christianity, man, you got a good chance you're going to end up an atheist.
Oh, yeah. I heard years ago it was something like, it's almost like 90% of kids who grow up in the church don't stay with it.
Yeah.
It's like, wait.
Yeah. If you grow up in a safe, loving environment, all of a sudden you're like, I'm allowed to investigate all these other things.
Yeah.
But it ain't a problem for somebody. Like there was a documentary, I think it was a Vice documentary years ago about a guy that was like a cannibal warlord. Like he was like, I ate lots of people. Like an eater of people and hearts and stuff like that. And then he was the preacher of a church. He became like a Bible preacher.
Yeah.
And the Christians, they do see that and they're like, man, you don't get it. Like I know a lot about Christians. We grew up in the Christian church. That's why I'm referring to that. I would be more ignorant talking about other belief systems that go from that to religious. Yeah. But in Christianity, they're so blessed to hear about people because a lot of the strong Christians, that's what happened. That's exactly what happened. I was a biker, man. Like a violent gang-related biker. Yeah. And then I became a Christian, and then God saved me, and now I can like be at least a little bit at peace and know I'm going to heaven when I die. Yeah. Forgiven for all that horrible stuff I did.
Yeah. Yeah. So many, all I will say around this is that providing an environment of safety and possible prosperity and hope, when you provide a fertile ground like that, it changes a lot of things. Changes a lot of things. It's the answer to a lot. A lot of the problems that are going on in the world today could be fixed by just making sure everyone had enough food and a roof over the head.
This is hyper anecdotal.
Yeah.
We're like skipping from scientific to anecdotalsville where we are. But it is true. But you also think about Christians that grew up in a Christian home and grow up to be atheists, and then they got to go to therapy to for all the religious trauma that they got. Yeah. They're like, I was felt guilty about who I am my life. I felt guilty. And then they got to do therapy. And then they have kids. And then they're like, I ain't exposing my kids to any religiosity. And then but that's an anecdotal opinion we have about the progression of people through stuff. Let's see what else this has to say.
Right.
That might explain why atheism is more common in societies with less income inequality and stronger social safety nets. For example, the Nordic countries have rapidly secularized over the last 70 years or so, in tandem with what political scientists describe as conditions of existential security. Scholars argue that the result is disaffiliation from religion, less and less public religious practice, and finally, high rates of atheism. Okay, so we've discussed mentalization and motivation as factors that people might need in order to believe in gods. The third is credibility from their peers, which comes from a quirk of cultural learning called credibility-enhancing displays. Credibility-enhancing displays, or CREDs, refers to behaviors that outwardly demonstrate a person's commitment to their professed beliefs. See, we humans really pay attention to each other's behavior, and we especially are convinced by actions that come with a cost that proves someone's sincerity. We aren't just persuaded when people talk the talk, we are more persuaded when people walk the walk, people who practice what they preach. Actions that would be very costly to do or very hard to fake if someone was not serious about their faith become very strong indicators of that person's true conviction. For example, imagine someone comes up to you and offers you some mushrooms and claims they are very delicious. Should you eat them? Maybe they're super expensive mushrooms from Whole Foods. Or maybe this person is not as friendly as they seem and these mushrooms are more of the instant death variety. How can you be sure? Well, easy. If they eat the mushroom first, then you can safely infer that they genuinely believe that the mushrooms are safe to eat. And religions offer a ton of opportunities to prove someone's sincere commitment. A whole repertoire of hard-to-fake actions that speak louder than words. Mandatory attendance for specific rituals. Wearing specific clothing that marks you as an insider. Abstaining from certain tasty foods or sex. Or even extreme practices like bodily mortification or martyrdom. When new cultural learners see everyone around them acting out their belief in a particular god or gods, they are much more likely to adopt and maintain that belief for themselves. But as culture evolves, the cultural signals that pass on faith to the next generation, what we call CREDs, can become weaker or muddled. As existential security increases, religious participation declines. Belief becomes more of a private and personal thing, leaving the next generation of cultural newbies with fewer obvious CREDs nudging them toward belief. Moreover, in more diverse and globalized societies, there might still be a lot of CREDs in society, but they're directed at a bunch of different gods. The result is the same. Cultural learners receive fewer or less consistent CREDs endorsing any specific god, and as a result, they are less likely to believe in any. Gervais dubbed this incredulous atheism, a disbelief that arises from fewer or less consistent religious CREDs culturally pushing people toward belief in any one god. Other scholars have found that measuring childhood exposure to CREDs is a strong way to predict rates of atheism. The anthropologist Hugh Turpin has also documented how Catholicism in Ireland remained steady while the rest of Europe rapidly secularized, in large part because the tight fusion between Catholic and Irish identities kept rates of visible CREDs very high in society. However, Ireland is now undergoing a rapid secular shift, as unfolding church scandals have driven down public participation in Catholicism, leaving younger generations of cultural learners with fewer and fewer CREDs to bolster their faith. Zooming out from small-scale case studies like Ireland, there's also evidence from large-scale international surveys that exposure to fewer religious CREDs is a consistent predictor of rates of atheism across countries. So these are what Gervais calls the 4 pathways to atheism: rationality, mentalization, motivation, and credibility. In the time since that new atheist roundtable, large representative samples have enabled researchers to compare these 4 factors in different countries to figure out which of these have the strongest effect on a social level. And recent studies suggest that the most important pathway within each country and across them was credibility. In study after study, exposure to fewer religious credibility-enhancing displays has been the best predictor of atheism. If you do not see your co-religionists doing stuff that proves their sincerity and commitment, you are less likely to believe. After all, we humans are more of a social species than we are a rational species, so it's not all that surprising that cultural learning also appears to be a significant factor influencing who believes and who doesn't. These studies also found that conditions underlying motivation, like social stability and wealth, were not strong predictors of atheism. Now, that doesn't mean that material conditions and insecurity are irrelevant to causing atheism. There's plenty of evidence linking levels of insecurity to things like religious practice, but the research suggests that apathetic atheism might be more of an indirect influence on the rates of atheism. As life gets more stable and predictable, some people become atheists, but more importantly, those people become less public in their religion, which reduces the baseline level of religious CREDs that other people observe in society, which then leads to subsequent generations of cultural learners to incredulous atheism. This all is covered in Gervais' book, Disbelief: The Origins of Atheism in a Religious Species. To many atheists out there, including some of the world's most famous ones, atheism is all about rationality, science-mindedness, and critical thinking. The popular influence of this view might make it seem like a strong scientific consensus, but the serious scientific study of atheism points to rationality being...
So look at this sign. There's probably no God, so stop worrying and enjoy life. Easy. Sounds easy enough, right? I'm pretty sure the guy that wrote that is like frequently red-faced, sort of like me, and like hyper-rational and like frustrated that other people don't get it. It's, like some of these guys. I think Christopher Hitchens is his name.
Yeah, or Hawking. I don't know their names.
Hitchens. I used to love listening to him, man. When I was in my like self-revolution out of religion, I really resonated with what he said and how frustrating it is to deal with religious people that won't see logic and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But keyword frustrating to the point where you plaster on a bus, there's probably no God, so just enjoy your life. It's the same thing I do here. It's the same thing I did not too long in the video. Yeah. There's a frustration in it. There's ego in it. There's ego in that sign, right? There's ego in the desire to convince other people, even of their own shackles. Yeah. Because you're arguing through your own shackles. Yeah. That's just what that sign reminds me of. Stop worrying and enjoy yourself. It's not that easy to stop worrying. What are you talking about? Whether there's a God or not, there will be worry.
At best, a minor factor in the global production of atheism. Are there special cognitive skills that make people atheists? Well, not so much. Instead, atheism is primarily rooted in the same thing that explains our phenomenal success as a species: our capacity for culture. Who you learn from is a better predictor of atheism than how you think. So this whole episode was about people changing their minds. In fact, changing their whole worldviews, from theist to atheist. I've been doing a lot of research into psychedelics and religion, and there's an emerging picture that psychedelics can trigger transformative experiences like this. For example, one recent study found that psychedelic trips can alter people's belief in the metaphysical, making them more likely to believe in supernatural phenomena. The going theory is that psychedelics induce a temporary period of plasticity, or changeability, that allows the brain and mind to change during and following these experiences. A scholar who's making a name for himself in this corner of the study of religion is Ari Brower. Ari is a PhD student at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and he helped to develop what's called a pivotal mental states theory to explain how stress can facilitate psychotic and spiritual experiences by increasing psychedelic-like signaling in the brain. In other words, he's arguing that stress induces that plasticity in our brains even without psychedelics. If you're interested in this intersection of psychedelics and religion, Ari will be teaching a Religion for Breakfast webinar on September 25th at 7:00 p.m. US East Coast time. It's called Messianic Impulses, a psychedelic model of revolutionary consciousness. Ari will be sharing what psychedelics can teach us about the psychology of a messiah, the psychology of messianic impulses. Over and over again throughout history, messianic movements emerge out of times of oppression and suffering, leading to visionaries prophesying about change. Ari will be exploring how the pivotal mental states theory can help explain the emergence of messianic and revolutionary consciousness under conditions of stress and adversity. If you'd like to register, head on over to religionforbreakfast.eventbrite.com. As is always the case with our webinars, the cost is whatever you'd like to pay, starting at $1. And no worries if you're not able to join live. I'll be recording the session and emailing it to everyone who registers. Hope to see you there.
That last part was really interesting.
Yeah, maybe we'll have to take a look at that.
Stress can be like a catalyst
for leaning into atheism?
Leaning into messianic state. Whatever they were saying. Were you paying attention?
Yeah. Oh, that part, yes.
I don't know. Maybe I got it wrong. I thought what it was saying was this. It was like, yeah, psychedelics can lead to this, but apparently, maybe I heard it wrong. It sounded like it was saying stress can lead to...
Or like anything catastrophic. How many times have you heard a story of someone who had something terrible happen to them and then all of a sudden they found Jesus? Or they found
enlightenment,
something to believe in, or even in enlightenment. But the thing that really stuck out to me in this video, nearing the end, he was talking about this safety, and it's a wonder, what we might become provided safety to just allow ourselves to do that. I think a lot of people feel restrained, like they don't have the freedom to be who they are, believe the things they want to believe, or like not even believe it, but just to have an opinion or an idea about something. I think it might be this way. There's a lot of pressure in society, and because we even feel it's, believe it or not, I feel it sometimes when I read the comments on the reactions that we do here, because they don't line up necessarily with the belief systems of the people that we're reacting to on the, about the certain religious beliefs. And then you get inundated with comments about it's not that way, and then you better see it this way, and if you can just
how you make a diamond, man, you squeeze that shit. My whole childhood I just felt like eyes that were just judgment, like you are so goddamn weird, Justin. Maybe quiet down, settle down, calm down, settle down, be quiet, and that'll make somebody turn into a fucking diamond. It'll be like, I can only suppress so long before it's going to explode into chaos. And now you can't shut me up, for God's sake. Yeah. There's no off switch anymore because of that. So maybe let people be who the fuck they want, because those same people you ever try to suppress into being some way, even if it's yourself, you try to hold it all in. I'll hold myself the correct way. It will find its way out.
Yeah.
And it's got teeth when it gets out, especially if it's done in some kind of stupid, knuckle-dragging Neanderthalic way out of fear. You know what I mean? If this person figures out who they really are, they're going to be a problem.
Yeah.
So let's suppress them. They will come back. You'll think they were dead, and they'll come back 7 years later, louder, more rainbow-clad than ever. Sprinkling pixie dust all over your nice world. So let them be, and praise what needs to be praised, and be honest with how you really feel. Even if you feel jealous sometimes, go around being like, hey, I'm real jealous of you today. I feel jealous. And lose because of it. And then you will become fucking more mighty than Jesus. You'll be a globe-trotting, Buddha Christ hybrid. Like something out of an anime. Just living the best life you can ever imagine. Easy to talk. You don't know what my life's like, and I'm not going to let you in on what it is actually like, but it is awesome. Yeah. You concur, I got a good life, right? Awesome. So be yourself. Be your goddamn self, no matter what you are. If you believe in something, believe till the wheels fall off. But when the time comes to shed it like a snake skin and become an atheist, do that with your whole heart. And when it comes time to take psychedelics or whatever it is, be stressed out into becoming enlightened, do that with your whole heart. That's the message. That's the whole of the message.
All right. Well, hopefully you guys liked our reaction on this. If you did, don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, share with a friend, and everyone until next time,
stay spiritual.